If you're too far into the feminine, the masculine energy will use words like being bored. If you're feminine too far in the masculine, you will use words like being overwhelmed, chaotic, hectic. But I think one of the things that I always remind people is like, well, you actually want to get to these points.
Welcome back to Coach's Corner. I'm Jay. Today, we are diving into a hot one, the masculine versus feminine energy in building your business. Now, you are not going to flow your way into 20K months. That is a myth. We'll break down why, using what Zander calls the airplane throttle rule, and that explains why most coaches never take off. I'll also share a behind-the-scenes story of one of our clients who now makes $500,000 a year working less than 20 hours a week, but only because she went hard on the masculine at the start and then shifted to a more feminine energy once her business got going. There's no fluff, no theory, just frameworks and real stories. Play the music. This is Coach's Corner. Zander, I've been hearing the terms masculine and feminine energy for a while now in the coaching space.
Yeah.
I know you've done some work on this. Can you define what it is?
I mean, I can do my best to define it. Is that going to be good enough?
Yes. Let's two men talking about masculine and feminine energy.
Two dudes talking about masculine and feminine. So I do, and this is something Maddie and I have been, pretty passionate about, kind of understanding how the masculine and feminine work, together. For probably like 5 years now, we've done a lot of studying and work with coaches and mentors like David Data, Allison Armstrong, John Gray, some of the top practitioners in the space to understand it. In prep for this conversation, I decided, probably talk to the best guru in the space, ChatGPT, and ask them what they thought. The core essence of the masculine energy is direction, structure, logic, and it is driven by doing. The qualities of the masculine energy are they're focused, they're disciplined, they're decisive, protective, action-oriented, and goal-driven with linear thinking as the main driver, right? So the expression of the masculine energy is moving forward, growth, creating frameworks, systems, and structure, and taking action towards a vision and setting boundaries. So those are kind of like the defining qualities and expressions of the masculine energy. From a feminine energy standpoint, the core essence is flow, creativity, intuition, and it's driven by being. So rather than doing, it's being. The qualities are nurturing, empathic, connected, intuitive, receptive, expressive, playful, nonlinear, heavily focused on relational qualities, so connection with other people. And the expression is, it inspires ideas, it creates beauty, it connects deeply with others, going into flow and surrendering to the present moment. Very, very focused on being present in the now. High level, if you think of that, masculine is building towards the future, involves patience, it involves action, involves growth. The feminine energy is about, enjoying the now, being present in the now, in the moment sort of thing. That's my definition, thanks to ChatGPT. Does that work?
I guess I hear this as it relates to building a business. I want a more sort of feminine style to the business, or I want to approach it in a feminine way or in a masculine way. Can you tell me how you think this kind of relates to building a business? So
I'd say every single one of us has some version of the expression of the masculine and some version of the expression of the feminine, right? And it's, I'm not saying specifically men or women, but it's like, depending on who you are, you're going to have a higher expression of the masculine or a higher expression of the feminine. And it's not like a 1 or a 0. You're not just like all masculine, no feminine. It's more of like a spectrum, if you will. Like you might be like, 70% masculine and 30% feminine, or you might be 70% feminine and 30% masculine, or you could be somewhere very evenly in the middle, 50-50. When it comes to business, the first, I think probably the first step is really understanding where you are. There's certain expressions of each that are really important in business, depending on what stage you're in when it comes to either growing or maintaining or connecting with your clients or, building the structures and things like that. It's going to be an expression of the different masculine and feminine qualities that are going to really help you in that state.
Yeah.
Jay, where on the spectrum would you be?
It's probably something like 70-30. I definitely skew more towards the masculine, but I also, helped raise 2 younger sisters and, like I definitely can kind of tap into that. But when it comes to focusing on business, it's really heavily masculine. Like I'm thinking like, how do I achieve this or do this?
So that's an interesting thing that you're bringing up. Even just within the business, you have to show up with different aspects of the masculine and feminine. So for example, when you're talking about the actual building of the business, like you might be significantly higher in the masculine. You might be 80, 90% in the masculine, only like 10, 15, 20% in the feminine. But obviously as a coach, right, it's very interrelational. It's very, you have to be empathic. You have to be deeply connected. You have to hold space and understand. So it's kind of, you might be more towards the 70-30 or even the 60-40 on that part of the business almost. Specifically,
why I wanted to bring this up is I hear this on like, Q&As or, some of the sort of email back and forth. It's like, I want to build a business that's a little bit more on the feminine side, a little bit more on the softer side. When you and I have talked about it, it's like, well, okay, great. You want to build a business that's on the feminine side, but you want to make $20K per month.
But the act of building a business is a masculine energy, right? We already talked about it. The definition of masculine is action oriented. It's achieving a goal. It's, driving for growth. It's expansion. It's discomfort, right? That is it. Like in the process of building a feminine business, you actually have to lean into the masculine.
Ever since you kind of talked to me about this, I've noticed it. It's just like, I've noticed some of the most successful, more sort of softer or feminine businesses, when you get below the surface, you realize that there's like a very sort of masculine push behind that.
Yeah.
This is a question. If business is a masculine pursuit, what are the things that they're doing behind the scenes that make it work?
Yeah. And so I would adjust that statement a little bit. I don't necessarily think business is a masculine pursuit. Growing a business is a masculine pursuit, right? So that's the subtle difference there. The act of growing or expansion, or like we talked about, building towards a goal. If you're in a coaching, you're running a coaching business and you're at $0 to get to 20K per month or 30K per month or 50K per month, you have to lean into the masculine. You have to grow. You have to take action. You have to get out of your comfort zone. It's about doing to accomplish something, about getting somewhere. But once you get to that somewhere, you bring in a lot of the aspects of the feminine to maintain and run the business. It's the interrelational, it's the creative ideas, it's the being in flow, and obviously the connection, especially in a coaching business, the connection. I think at HIC, probably about 60% of our clients are more feminine, right? So maybe even like 2/3 of our clients, and I'm not necessarily saying men or women, even the men that we work with, like I have a very soft feminine side, right? And the men that we work with, you get into the coaching space because you have a softer side. You wouldn't be in the coaching space if you didn't have a softer side. And so, a lot of the coaches that we work with, I'd probably say about 2/3 are stronger feminine energies than masculine energies. Yet we have this goal of building or growing a coaching business. And to your point, I think what's really important there is, first, just the conceptual understanding of like, I think, there's a lot of coaches, like you mentioned, that get into the space and they say like, I want to build a feminine coaching business. That's fine. You can build a feminine coaching business, but the process of getting there is masculine. If you don't understand that, if you have this expectation that my business is just going to grow from $0 to 100K per month by just being, like not doing anything, it's never going to happen. That's the misconception, is you can't actually grow the business by just being a feminine energy. You have to tap into that masculine. We've worked with thousands of coaches, and to your point, I've never seen someone build a feminine coaching business without tapping into the masculine while they are growing the business to get to that point. To answer your question though, just real quick, for those higher feminine energies, it's like, first understand that like I am going to have to tap into the masculine and get out of my comfort zone and focus on doing and growth and these things. And so it's a lot of what we have to work on with our clients is like helping them find other ways to get their feminine expression while they are, putting themselves a little bit out of balance by, focusing a little bit more on the masculine to build the business.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. What I'm kind of envisioning is like, okay, putting an offer out there, doing a blunt post, where you say like, hey, I'm looking for, 5 people that want to achieve something.
Yeah.
Having a sales script, asking for the sale.
Those are all masculine energies.
In my case, when I started like negotiating a lease, or
Yeah.
all of the things that require you to like make decisions and move forward, without all the information.
The act of making a decision, right? Being decisive is a masculine energy. As soon as you set a goal and a timeline, it flips you from feminine energy to masculine energy. As soon as you set a goal with a timeline.
You said you skew more towards the sort of softer side. What kind of energy would you say you started your business with?
Very highly masculine. Well, actually, I take that back. So here's what really happened. When I was working at Cisco, I was so in the masculine energy because you're in corporate, same thing, right? If you're in the corporate space, like again, the act of being corporate is masculine. It's goals and deadlines and structure and things like that, right? And so I was so heavily in my masculine because I had sales projections that I needed to keep. I had deadlines that I needed to keep, KPIs and all this sort of stuff. I was so heavily in the masculine that even though me personally, I was, I'd probably say I might be like a 60-40, like 60 masculine, 40 feminine, or maybe pretty evenly split, but I have the capability of leaning either direction. Like I have the capability of going extremely masculine when I need to, or going extremely feminine when I need to, because I've just kind of built that range by practicing it. When I was in corporate, I was probably so heavily in the masculine side of things that even though I was only working like 35 hours a week, maybe 40 hours a week, it was completely draining. There was so much masculine, and it was not aligned with what I really wanted to be doing in my life, that I couldn't find any of my creative expression outside of work because I would just be exhausted by the time I was done.
Right.
So what happened was when I quit, I still remember when I quit, I had this idea, this belief that I was like, okay, I'm starting this coaching business. Everything's just going to be in flow and easy. And it's just, I'm never going to do anything that I don't want to do ever again. Right. Cause it's just, I'm just going to be like making my own decisions, and I'm going to have complete financial freedom and time freedom and all this sort of stuff. I believed that I would be walking into this like, much more balanced, full expression of my feminine that I'd been missing. Like it felt like I wanted to go the other direction and be like 70% feminine, 30% masculine, because I had been so masculine for so long that my entire being was just like, nah, fuck that, I'm out. And obviously I did that for a couple of months, and like the business went nowhere. And it was a fun couple of months. I got to do all these things that I wanted to do, and I was having a great time. And I very quickly learned, like, holy shit, the business will not grow this way. Like, I have to lean back into my masculine to really get this up and running. And I think that awareness
was some of the things that you were doing that man, looking back, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that.
Just stuff like, like when I first quit my job, like I had friends that, I had a friend that, went to like New York because he just wanted to go to, and like, keep in mind, I'm in the thralls of, I just quit. I didn't have a ton of money saved up to like build my business, but like I desired that feminine flow so much that when my buddy went to New York just for like a week, I was just like, oh yeah, I'll come. Like the business I was just being present and in the moment, because for the first time I had the flexibility that nobody was going to tell me, no, you can't take PTO. You can't take time off this week. So I was making all my decisions in the now. And by the way, I think that is by far one of the worst pieces of advice that is ever been put in the personal development space, right? Like make all your decisions like there is no tomorrow, right? Like, well, that's fucking stupid, because there is a tomorrow. And if you make all your decisions like there's no tomorrow, like I did, you burn through cash and you don't grow to the point where tomorrow is better. Like most likely anybody who's listening to this, you're not gonna die tomorrow. So today is not your last day. So you have to remember, it's like, yes, you need to live today, but you also need to live in a way that makes tomorrow better.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, there was so many little things like that where I was just like, I was hanging out with friends during, lunch dates and, coffee at 10 a.m. and not working, not putting the energy into the business that I needed to, because I just missed being present for so long.
So, I mean, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing because you kind of needed that reset.
I needed it. I definitely needed that reset. But then I learned very quickly that the business isn't going anywhere unless I lean back into my masculine. And then I kind of got back to the structure, the discipline, like, okay, I got to get to work and actually build a life where I can do this regularly, where I can, if I want to, go on a coffee date at 10 a.m. every Tuesday, I can, because it won't be like the other things are taken care of.
And at that point, you just started like a daily routine, like what did you do?
At that point, it was Zander's military training came in, and I was waking up at 4 a.m. I was doing all my meditations and visualizations, then straight to the gym. And then, I'd have, 3 hours worth of work done before, most people were heading off to their jobs at 9 a.m. The thing that kind of stuck with me, I remember there was a famous Jim Rohn quote. He says, to have more, you must become more. Well, in order to become more, you have to grow by definition, right? That is growth. And one of my favorite quotes from John Maxwell, he says, growth and discomfort are synonymous. So you have to be, taking decisive actions, getting uncomfortable, doing the courageous things, right? It's about doing, it's about stretching, it's about getting uncomfortable, pursuing your mission, pursuing your vision. All of this is masculine energy stuff. And I figured, I was like, okay, well, I want to get to that life where I have a lot more of this flow and that feminine energy in my business and what I'm doing, but I'm also a very impatient person. So I can either, spend a lot of my time just kind of like building the business slowly to get there and enjoying, the present moment right now, or I could just work my ass off for the next 6 months and just get there in 6 months. And then I have a lot more flexibility after that. That was kind of the route that I decided to take. I really dove in for, probably that first 6 to 12 months. The first 6 months were ruthless. And then the next 6 months it was still pretty masculine oriented about just like, I really want to build to a point where then I can just introduce a lot more the flexibility and flow into what I'm doing.
Thinking through how I started my business, it's really similar. It's like you just go all in as hard as you can for as long as you can, and you kind of throw yourself a little bit out of balance. But it's not, I won't even say for as long as you can. It actually takes a lot less time than you think.
Oh, 100%.
6 months, 12 months, and you can get to a point where you're like, oh, I have more flexibility with this stuff.
Oh my God, I've just built a life, right? Yeah. The example that I always give to people, right? It's a lot of people are like, well, I want to build the business in a much, more feminine capacity. And it's like, well, you can, but I think to what you're talking about, that's when it takes, people spend years trying to get there doing it that way, and they actually end up never getting there. And the example I give, it's like getting an airplane to take off, right? Like if you're in an airplane and you want to get an airplane to take off, right? At some point, you have to give it full throttle. You have to lean into as far into the masculine as you can go without burning out, like you mentioned, right? But if you only give it 50% throttle, it's just going to take longer to take off, right? Like if I just give it 50% throttle, it's just going to take longer to take off. No, it just never fucking takes off. You just run along the runway until you hit the end of the runway and you crash and burn. You go, oh shit, that didn't work. Yeah. And it's not because the business didn't work. It's not because the model didn't work. It's because you gave it 50% throttle the whole way. But if you had really given it like 80, 90, 100% throttle for 2 minutes, right? 2-3 minutes, you could get it up to a cruising altitude, and then you could pull back to 50% throttle and cruise.
Yeah, that reminds me of a quote that I heard. It's like everyone has the capacity and can become a billionaire.
Yeah.
Most people die before they get there.
Yeah. I love that. So that was like me getting my business up and running. I want to hear you. How was it for you? Like, you said you threw yourself fully in. Did it stay like that for a long time until you burnt out, or how did it work?
When I started my first business, it was something I was doing on the side of my full-time job. We made a decision to do it. I put money into it. I put time into it. Just, that first sort of month. And then we finally opened our doors. Again, I'm a little bit older, so we actually had to have doors.
Doors, physical doors.
And we opened the doors, and then it was just like every morning, every evening, I was putting everything that I had into that business.
Everything that was left over before and after the 9 to 5.
Yeah, before and after the 9 to 5, I basically said no to everything else. I stopped having friends. I stopped, going out.
I mean, that never changed. You still have no friends, but that's okay.
That's actually true. So I stopped doing all of that stuff. And even like at the time, I think my daughter was born maybe 18 months into that. I had zero time. I did everything that I could to make that thing work. And it took about 18 months or so before the business was making enough money, like life had kind of stabilized, and I had hired one or two people, and I kind of looked up and I was like, oh, right. Like I could go out, for dinner, on a Thursday night, right? I could go out, and do this and do that. And it's like, that happened for the first business, and the second business, it was the same way. It was just like 6 months of just going all in.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, I could take Wednesday afternoon off. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have to, clean the floors. I don't have to like answer all the emails. I actually want to kind of tap into, the reason I started this in the first place, a little bit of the freedom part.
And that's the feminine part. That is getting you back to that like more 70-30 sort of flow. But for a while you have to lean into it. And I think, there's probably a lot of people listening to this that are like, oh yeah, but you're just a couple of dudes talking about this. Of course you guys can do it, right? But it's like I mentioned, probably two-thirds of our clients are higher feminine energies that are, like the first client that I think of is Rachel Caven, who you and I both know, are close friends with now. Just for the audience sake, Rachel's a past client of ours. And right now, and Rachel, I apologize if you're listening to this and I just completely butcher everything that I'm saying, but Rachel makes a very healthy salary. So we'll just call it somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million in her business, right? She has amazing team. She's an amazing leader. And the last time I talked to her, she works about 10 hours a week on the business. People hear that, right? And they're like, oh my God, this like badass woman is working 10 hours a week, making $500,000 to $1 million a year as a coach, right? Helping women lose weight, right? And so like she's living the ideal feminine business model, but that's not what got her started. What got Rachel started when she first started, she was single mom, right? Single mom, like brand new child. And she worked her ass off to build a 6-figure business, right? I remember chatting with her. She's like, I'd go 2-3 weeks without doing the laundry because I knew that I knew that I had to put the energy into the business to get it to where I wanted it to be. I knew that I had to lean into that masculine side of it to get it to the point where I could really fully express my feminine creativity and intuition and everything that I wanted to. I had to go the other direction for a little bit. And I could name you 100 other, stories like that where, it took a high feminine energy accepting the fact that they had to swing a little bit of out of balance into that masculine energy to get it up and running. And then after that, the whole life that they always wanted gets there. But it takes a willingness to kind of lean into that, a little bit of patience, knowing that I can't have it right now. I'm going to have it in a little bit further.
Yeah. And with Rachel's a great example. I mean, you look at her website and she's got, it's a beautiful website, and she's got all these, her talking on all these nationally syndicated television shows. And it's like, that doesn't happen by accident. Like somebody put the work in to make that website, and it was 100%. Probably her, she made the calls to get on those shows. And it was just like, it doesn't happen by just kind of feeling your way to it. It's like, she put in a ton of effort to get there.
And now she literally does not do a single thing in the business she does not want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think about this too in different times of the business. And I know this is true of you as well. It's like during COVID, when my gyms were shut down, it was like, I went from like, okay, I wasn't, I was probably working 20 hours a week. During COVID, it was like, 50, 100 hours a week.
It had to shift. Yeah.
Because it was just like, we got to save this thing, and showing up every single day and doing the thing every single day.
Yeah. And I think that's important to understand is as an entrepreneur, the more that we're talking about it, it's almost like as an entrepreneur, like we have our ideal of where we want to be in terms of like, we talked about it on the spectrum. If you're a 60-40 or a 40-60 or 50-50 or whatever it might be, you have your ideal, but in order to get there, sometimes you have to be willing to swing out of that ideal to get there. Like if you're just going to stay in that spot, you're not going to be able to grow. You're not going to be able to expand and get to where you really want to.
Have you seen examples of people who approach their business with too much feminine energy? Like, what happens to them?
All the time, man. Nothing happens.
How do they get past it?
What do you mean? I know. Have you seen people that approach it with too much feminine energy?
Okay, fine. It was a setup question. Tell me about an example of somebody that was approaching this with too much of a feminine energy, and like, how did you get them out of it?
Honestly, this is one of our current clients right now. I think I won't name her name. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me naming her name, but beautiful, beautiful soul, amazing energy, very heart-centered, right? And what happened for her is every time she leans into the masculine energy, her business grows very drastically. And when we first started working with her, she went from no business, had been trying to build a business for 15 years and not making more than a couple $1,000s, to getting to the point of 20, 30K months within 3 to 5 months, because she started to lean into the masculine. But then what happened is, as soon as she started to get to that point where she had some quote unquote safety and space because the money was there, right? Her natural thermostat was so much further back into the feminine, and the business would collapse. And it did this maybe 2 or 3 times over the course of a couple of years. It was like, grow the business, then collapse the business, because rather than finding the sweet spot of like, okay, how do I build my capacity for being able to handle the masculine so that I don't go on these, it's like yo-yo dieting, right? It's like, these people that lose a bunch of weight and then they gain it right back, and they lose a bunch of weight and gain it right back, rather than focusing on, well, how do I become someone who has a bit more of balance in their masculine and feminine energy so that I can actually maintain this?
Yeah.
Right?
How do you go into sort of maintenance mode?
Yeah. Because like really to maintain, I tell people right now, like if I just wanted to maintain high impact coaching at like a $4 million business, right, I could lean fully into the feminine and probably do like 20% feminine, 80% masculine, and work like 10 hours a week.
You mean flip it, 80% feminine.
80% feminine, 20% masculine, right? And work like 10 hours a week. And I could maintain a $4 million coaching business like for the rest of my life. I absolutely could, right? But that's not my goal. That's not where I want to be. And so for me, I have needed to actually, even let's say I am a 50-50, well, I do feel like my purpose, my goal is to expand to more and get to more. So I have had to personally work on my capacity for the masculine energy and allowing myself to lean into that and harbor that and own that, to make sure that I'm helping the people that really need us. And so that's something that we have to teach a lot of our more feminine clients, is like, how do you change your thermostat a little bit? Like if you are really 20-80, well, how do you get it to 30-70 or maybe even 40-60 so that it's a little bit more balanced, so that you can put the right amount of energy into the business to get it to grow and stay where you want it to be?
What does that look like for you? Because like you said, you had these periods where you push really hard, and then, you're not kind of in this like 100% all in period right now. Maybe it's like 80% or 70, whatever. What does that look like in practice on a daily basis for you?
You bring up a really good point. For me, I have found I make sure that every quarter I take 1 week off a quarter to travel and be completely off. Next week, Maddie and I are going to Italy. We're going to Positano and Sardinia, right? So 1 week every single quarter, I make sure that I'm doing that. Next quarter, we'll be going to Australia. And so 1 week a quarter, I make sure that I'm getting that time away. But also 1 weekend a month, I make sure I'm taking a long weekend, right? So I take a Friday off and I get some time off. But even then, like within the structure of my week, I build my week so that it fits that energy for me, where, Mondays and Fridays are much more flowy and feminine. And then the middles, I call it my pyramid. Monday is kind of feminine and flowy. I'm starting to get back into the swing of things. Then Tuesday, it really starts to pick up. Wednesday is like, let's fucking go. like I am running group calls and workshops and doing big shit from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. And then Thursday is a little bit more flowy than that. And then Friday is so it's like a pyramid, right? But I've just found this type of structure really works for me, is you're never really just in stasis. You're never in equilibrium. You're always kind of flowing between one side or the other. Sometimes you're higher masculine, sometimes you're higher feminine. And finding that balance for you as an individual I think is really helpful. We have one of our clients, Yuri, she works 3 days a week, right? And I think it's she does Monday all in, Tuesday all in, Wednesday, it's Monday all in, Tuesday all in, then Wednesday and Thursday are half days. So the mornings are all in, but the afternoons are off, and then Friday's completely off. And for her, that spacing really helps. So it's like Monday, Tuesday, she can like really go for it and get, she built a, 40K per month coaching business working 3 days a week. But it's because in those blocks, she's very, very in her masculine. And then outside of those blocks, she's much more in her feminine. So I think that really, really helps people. It's like, create this separation between where you're trying to be a business builder and where you're trying to be just present and enjoying life.
So let's flip the narrative then. How do you take someone like me who maybe is a little too hard charging? And then, kind of, because I've recognized, I've had plenty of examples in the business where it's just like, too hard charging, like just back off, Jay. Like, I can see where it hurts, right? Being a little more empathetic, connecting with my creativity is really more needed in certain situations.
Yeah, and it feels like it's got put on the back burner for sure.
How would you recommend someone like me kind of soften up to be able to find more of that sort of balance, or at least make space for it in their lives?
It's a good question. And again, this is more of what you would see in kind of the stereotypical entrepreneur that is a higher masculine energy. It's a little less common in the coaching space, but still happens very regularly. The stereotypical entrepreneur is like, go, 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 build, build, build. And then before you know it, they turn around and their family's left them and they've, have no friends and haven't connected with anybody. And they've just completely forgotten what they're supposed to be doing in the life.
I'm feeling triggered.
Right? What was that?
I said, I'm feeling triggered.
I'm feeling triggered. But it's not necessarily a wrong thing, right? It's just this entrepreneur really leaning into the masculine. Like for some people, that's actually how they are.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a wrong thing. Like if you really do just run at like an 80 or 90% masculine energy, that's not wrong. That's just you. But, to that person, unfortunately, what happens is like they build amazing things, they accomplish really amazing things, but because the feminine balance isn't there, they don't enjoy the process as much. They don't get to enjoy what's been built. They don't get to enjoy where it is, because really the masculine the masculine energy is about going on to the next thing, the next goal, the next mission, the next task, the next thing to accomplish. It's about doing, and the forgottenness of just being ends up hurting a bit. So for that person, a lot of the time, honestly, we kind of just like sit them down and tell them like, hey, take a break, go enjoy this. But again, for some people, they're not doing it because it's out of fear, right? Like they're like, oh my God, I'm not worthy. I got to keep building. I got to keep building. For other people, they're doing it because that's actually who they are and what they love to do. I have a lot of friends that are entrepreneurs that are like, they're just higher masculine energy, and like to tell them to like slow down and take time off. It's not, they're not building businesses, or they're not doing these things out of fear or out of lack or a hole that they're trying to fill. They're doing it because that's just genuinely who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. To that person, I try and find like what actually is you, right? And be true to that. For me, there's aspects of this business. Like there's times in this business where I could literally work 80 hours a week and be so content and so happy. And if someone was like, Zander, you should really slow down and take some time off, I'd be like, says you, because you're not doing something that you're really passionate about or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that it is always, just working really, really hard is necessarily a bad thing. It's just like we do have to remember, okay, if I want these other things in my life, that a little bit more of that balance, I do need to bring some more aspects of the feminine, being present, taking breaks, taking time off, slowing down. And what ends up happening for that higher masculine energy, when they take those breaks and when they slow down, they get this burst of creative, intuitive energy that then triggers this next stage of growth and capacity that they wouldn't have gotten had they just kept their head down and kept working.
Yeah, that's so good. It's so right on, actually.
One of the first people I think of is actually one of my good friends, Mark. Mark, if you're listening, this is about you. So he's one of our clients, very high masculine energy. His offer is helping men build their testosterone naturally. So if he doesn't have a high masculine energy, I don't know who the fuck would. But the guy can just get after it and go, go, go. And every now and then I have to be like, Mark, stop, take some time, come hang out with us at this event. like, come do this thing. And he's like, oh yeah, that maybe I don't have to just keep working with my head down this whole time. I can actually go do some creative being and see what comes from that. And it expands me from there.
Man, I've heard you say that to me as well. It's funny. It's funny as you're kind of describing this, like I said, I'm more like 70-30, but that 70 can take over.
That's the thing, is that masculine energy can be very, very overpowering if you're not aware of it.
One of the things that I do that really helps me is part of this masculine energy is feeling like you're accomplishing something. I personally find that this idea of getting up early and like working out or, whatever, like writing or doing something, like maybe doing some work first thing in the morning. If I feel like I'm accomplishing something, then I can just be.
If you feed that masculine a little bit, then you can allow yourself to lean into the feminine a bit more.
Yeah, I think it was it Jay Ferrugia was speaking at the last IAL. One thing that he said that stuck with me is try to get everything done as early as you can in the day, and then you can just be for the rest of the day. For me, that looks like, working out and, writing and doing some work. Is just like the more things I can accomplish, the more I can feel relaxed.
I can let the tension go. Yeah.
The other part for me is when I find if I have a day where I feel like nothing got done, then I'll just go to the gym and throw the heaviest weights around that I can. And then I feel like I did
treadmills and move them from one side to the other. But you bring up a really good point, because the opposite is true as well. For a higher feminine energy, a lot of the time a higher feminine energy wants to just wake up and be in flow and things like that. And I think there are aspects to, like, for me, a good friend and mentor of mine, Craig Ballantyne, his whole thing is like the drunken farmer morning routine. Like, you wake up and immediately get to work, right? Because like you mentioned, if you can just get something done, you're creating that liquid motivation. It's a combination of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain, which is literally liquid motivation and inspiration to keep you taking action. And for me, I've found, because I am a little bit higher feminine energy, I need to wake up a little bit more softly. I need to wake up with some breath work and some meditation and some visualization. But right after that, if I don't get immediately into some form of action like you were talking about, my day gets away from me very, very quickly, because I've settled into that feminine energy. And all of a sudden, before I know it, it could be noon and I'm like, yeah, I can't do anything today, right? Because the feminine energy just really settled in. So I do think you're right. I think it's really important. Like, in a day, it's much, much easier for me, at least I've noticed, if I'm able to lean into the masculine more early on, right? It's always a little bit of a shock to the system, kind of like a cold plunge, right? But it's always a little bit of a shock. Like if I'm up and still a little bit woozy and I go sit down at my desk to just start to get some shit done. But 90 minutes in, I've just accomplished so much and I'm motivated to go do another 90 minutes. And then at that point I've been, it might be 9 a.m. and I've done 3 hours worth of work. I've done my meditations, my visualizations. And at that point I can be like, okay, do I want to kind of taper it down a little bit? Do I want to dial back on the gas pedal, or do I want to kind of keep this going? But I can make a decision at that point.
That's so important, because I'm really big on morning routines, and I've asked you about yours and I've tried to copy it sometimes, and it's like, it's not really my morning routine.
I don't think it's the same for everybody.
At one point was like writing a ton every day, first thing in the morning. And it was just like, at a certain point I was like, this feels like a waste of time. What was crazy is I changed
because you'll hear that from creators everywhere. It's like you got to get up and you got to get creative and you got to write first thing in the morning.
But then I changed it to work out or like do a cold shower or whatever, and it's like right, okay, like I'm ready to go.
That's me. Let's go.
So it is a little different for every person.
I think that's really important for whether you're a masculine or feminine energy. Again, if we kind of come back to like, if I'm in the swing of growing my business, right? And we've accepted that requires a more masculine energy, then we need to find a way to kind of dip into that masculine earlier on, because it's much more difficult to dip into later on in the day when you've already kind of settled into the feminine energy. Whether it's a cold plunge or a cold shower, it's getting to the gym first thing in the morning, or like Craig does, like you wake up and you just get your quote unquote one thing done. You eat the big slimy frog and just get that done immediately. Whatever it is, do that thing to get you to the point of accomplishing, quote unquote, accomplishing something and putting you in that more masculine energy. Because from there, it's easier to decide, do I want to stay in the masculine energy or do I want to drop back into the feminine a bit more?
This has been really useful.
This has been useful for me. I'm realizing things now. I'm just like, oh man, yeah, that does happen.
Yeah. And no, I mean, just thinking, because I have a tendency personally to just like push myself to do the thing that I'm supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
And I rebel against myself. And it's not even like I don't feel like it. It's like a gut feeling that comes from doing it too many times.
Yeah.
And then I have to sort of find a balance on the other side where I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? Actually, I'm going to wake up whenever the hell I want. And I'm going to have a slow and, ambling coffee, and wander around the neighborhood with my dog versus like, I'm going to get up and go deadlift,
I'm going to go get shit done.
Yeah. And then I do that for a week and it's like, I need to get up and go deadlift.
Yeah. Yeah. I know the feeling, but back to it, it's like, you're never at stasis. You're never at equilibrium. You're always kind of dancing up and down and up and down around that equilibrium.
And it's important to kind of pay attention to that. So how can you tell? So this is my last question. Since we know it's this equilibrium, what are some ways that you recommend for people to tell if they're leaning too far in one direction or another?
I don't think anybody can tell you, but you will feel a natural pull the other direction, right? And most of the time, people will use words like if you're too far into the feminine, the masculine energy will use words like being bored. If you're too far, that's if you're a masculine too far in the feminine. If you're a feminine too far in the masculine, you will use words like being overwhelmed. These are kind of the two trigger words that you'll hear a lot. You'll hear a masculine energy feel a bit bored or stagnant or stale. You'll hear a feminine energy feel overwhelmed. Or that becomes very obvious, chaotic, hectic. But I think, for me, one of the things that I always remind people is like, well, you actually want to get to these points. One of the things that I was talking about with Maddie is when we go to Italy next week, I'm like, I cannot wait to get to the point where I am bored. Because really, me getting to the point where I feel bored is, when I think about it, it's an opportunity for me to expand in my emotional range in the feminine. I just had a client, actually maybe like 3 on our last group call that we were on, that were like, with like all the stuff going on and back to school and this and that and whatever it might be, right? They're feeling completely overwhelmed, emotionally overwhelmed, right? And they're like, Zander, what do I do? And my response was, great. And they were like, what the you're supposed to be my coach. You're supposed to help me out of this. And my response was, no. This is you expanding your capabilities in the masculine way. I'm not like, you're too far, you need to bring it back. And you probably do. But like, I flipped the script in terms of the perspective that I'm looking at here. If all in all, we're just trying to grow and expand as humans, right? We're trying to expand in our capabilities, our ability to love and connect on the feminine side, and our ability to pursue goals and live purposefully and grow on the masculine side. If this is what our purpose is this expansion of connection and love and growth and purpose and all these things, right? Well, you don't run from boredom and you don't run from overwhelm. You lean into them to see if I can expand my capacity of being able to handle that much quote unquote masculine without being overwhelmed, right? Or I can handle this much presence, right? That I'm calling boredom. Like, can I handle this much being present? I'm calling boredom because the masculine in me needs to go do something, right? But like, can I expand my capability of just being present and quiet and here in the moment? Overall, yes, you kind of want to, like, in general, be more towards that equilibrium, but like, I never run away and I never push our clients away from those states, because in the end, all that's doing is it's just you're expanding your range, you're expanding your capacity.
Man, I took so much away from this conversation. This has been
hopefully other people did too, or they're just gonna be like, what the fuck were those two guys talking about?
No, this is really good. I think for me, the biggest takeaway is just understanding that there is a flow to this. And, you live long enough, you do enough things, you kind of pick up on that. But when you put words to it, it's like, oh yeah, okay, there are times when I am bored. And there are times when I am, like overwhelmed. And I like to, like you said, I like to explore the corners of each. It's like, how bored can I be? Can I go on like a 10-day silent retreat and just be completely bored? And then
Yeah.
how overwhelmed can I be? Can I start 2 businesses while working a full-time job and having a kid? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
how far can you go, and what?
And that curiosity of exploration of that is really what, allows us to expand our consciousness, honestly.
Well, if you want to work on your coaching business, start a coaching business, lean into your masculine or feminine, click the link below and apply to work with us. Thanks for this one, Zander. This is really helpful.
Yeah, thanks, man. That was fun.